You're right. What is a podcast?
No, what is a podcast?
What's it about? Did you come unprepared again?
No.
Do we need to put you in the corner, young man?
Again? I'm
Again.
never prepared.
And that's
Are
why
you prepared?
That's why you're always in the corner.
Are
I'm
you
prepared. I know what the topic of this podcast
You know how
episode
bad
is.
the audio would sound if I was in that corner right now?
I mean, that's you. We just hear you yelling like, "I'm here! Don't worry."
That's not how I sound.
You're right.
Go ahead,
It
Anna.
doesn't sound like you're in a corner.
Yeah, if anything, it sounds like Anna's in the corner.
I like anime. I'm addicted to Fate. I'm a simp.
Is this your impression of me?
I like the tall vampire lady. I can't do an impression of you. You're too cute.
Tall
I
Empire
can't,
lady?
I can't pull Empire.
Tall Empire
I meant to
lady?
say vampire.
Empire lady?
You're,
Lady.
honey, I can't do an impression of you. You're too cute to pull off. Aww. Ah! He's pushing me! Help!
That's for
Empire
complimenting
lady.
him.
Empire lady.
Sorry. Would you rather I have said umpire lady? She plays baseball.
She does play baseball. She's very good at it.
You think Lady Dim played baseball?
I think she rocks at baseball.
Okay. Alright, so we're recording. Let's, maybe we should... Who wants to do the intro this time? Do you even know the topic, Eddie? Do you know what we're talking about?
No. I don't think I ever do.
You said that you agreed to the topic.
You literally chose between the two options that we gave you.
That was
You
like
decided what this
weeks
podcast
ago.
episode was gonna be about.
That was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah?
You know how long that is in COVID time?
Okay. The episode...
Do you know what this episode
Yes,
is about?
underrated. The concept of underrated
Don't say
in
it.
anime.
We're supposed to talk about
I
it.
know, but we haven't started yet. Somebody's got to
You're gonna
do.
spoil it.
Somebody's got to do the intro. Who wants to do the intro?
Recording for like 2 minutes, and you're already spoiling what this whole
All
episode's
right,
about.
we haven't started it yet. Who wants to do the intro? Any volunteer? Nose goes.
John, you do the intro.
I said nose goes. Eddie has nose goes. Okay, that's you on.
Alright. Wait, that's not fair. You can't even see what I'm doing.
You lost. You didn't do the nose. For
You-
nose goes.
You
Oh,
didn't.
so you're
Oh,
done?
wait, actually, that's true. I am the one who said it. No, you have to say it
Nose goes.
because we. Okay, Eddie said it first.
No.
How delayed was that? What is going? Are you okay? Are you okay on now? Do you need like some energy drinks or something? You responded like a full like 5 seconds after she said that.
Oh no. What did that?
All right, we'll all do the intro together. Ready?
No.
1.
Do it. Do it, punk.
We're doing it together.
Yeah, ready? 1,
No.
2, 3. Hello and
Whoa,
welcome
welcome
to
to
the
the
A.N.I.M.E. podcast.
That was awful.
Yeah,
That was awful.
I don't think we could do it together. I don't think.
That sounds like Nina Alexander tried to do our podcast intro.
You're
for
right.
us.
That's a great analogy. It sounds like what was his name? Envy. All of his like weird faces, all of his the souls were trying to all speak in
We're not
unison.
talking about FMA this episode. Why are you bringing it up?
You're right. FMA is definitely not an underrated anime.
Somebody overrated.
Hey, I don't agree with that at all. You want to fight? We were just talking about having a knife fight. We could do it right now,
We were
right here.
just fighting. Do you want to
I
change?
mean, you
what the
could
fight's
make a
about?
judgment that FMA, like the original now, is a bit underrated compared to Brotherhood.
I feel like it's a weird assessment though, especially for a series that has like a really famous like second entry / remake / redoing / redone / improvement.
Actually, we should really just introduce what this podcast is actually going to be about today, shouldn't we?
Probably. Who wants to do it? We just argued about
We're
this.
talking about underrated
No
anime. No, that does not include Sword Art Online. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to everyone who thought that. I'm sorry. Your opinion is
Apelian?
valid and heard,
But it's wrong.
but it's wrong. You are wrong.
Valid
Welcome
but
to
wrong.
Welcome to the A.N.I.M.E. podcast. I am Whimsy. I forgot my name there for a second.
Are you?
Who are
I
you?
am
Are you
No.
okay?
Yes, she is Ott now. Who
That's
are
all
you?
now.
Do you know who you are? Have you forgotten again?
Of course he forgot.
Do you?
His
Who is
name
that?
is...
Are you capable of remembering
Lad I
anything?
see staring. Well, no, we're gonna get DMCA'd.
Honey, we have done some sort of jingle and song some point the last like 6 episodes. I don't know if you know that. Like
We're gonna get DMCA'd.
we
for
sang
that.
High School Musical. We
Oh my
sang
God,
One
you're right.
Piece. I'm not saying something else last time.
DMCA'd for One Piece.
Spider-Man?
I think we've done Spider-Man. Yeah.
We might get DMCA'd for that.
All right, let's try this again. Hello, I am having a stroke. Hold on.
I'm Eddie. Now we have to keep that in.
Welcome to the A.N.I.M.E.
We already did that.
podcast. I
You
know.
already did
We're
that.
gonna keep that in, but we have to transition to an actual intro. Welcome to the A.N.I.M.E.
You
podcast.
didn't
Actual
like
podcast?
the teamwork that we did before?
I am Whimsy. This
You
is
already said that.
yes. This is Eddie, and you're Ott now. Hello, welcome. Today,
We're talking about underrated anime
exactly.
again.
Yes, that's what we're talking about,
All right.
and our inability to do an intro. All right, so
That's every episode.
So let's get started talking about the underrated anime. I know that we kind of like pre-talked about this a bit, and we all have a lot to say and a lot of thoughts. However, in true professional fashion, we did not plan how we were going to organize those thoughts. So does anyone want to kind of start us off with what underrated anime you like, or what even is the concept of underrated anime?
What if we think anime is underrated?
Then this is a great time to bring it
I
up.
mean, can we really say that now that Demon Slayer is the grossing film of 2020, like in the world? Can we
You know,
really say that?
Oh,
I
you meant
feel-
anime itself as
I
a medium.
felt
I was so
like-
confused. Oh.
Well, I feel like that's a weird competition considering that like Demon Slayer the film was actually its only other contender was Sausage Party.
All right, say the thing again.
You're always confused.
Say the thing again. Like, wouldn't you say that anime itself is overrated? Or is
Underrated.
not overrated? That's not what
Are you listening? You're not
What is
listening.
happening?
You're talking. You're not listening.
Ah!
You're making us redo parts.
Because my brain realized how interrupty I was,
Just
and I
throw this whole
ruined
thing
all
out.
the clips.
Just redo the whole thing all over
All right,
again.
hello and welcome to the A.N.I.M.E.
I
podcast.
didn't mean to, really. I didn't mean seriously.
Today,
start over.
We're gonna be
Oh
talking
my
about
God.
I'm okay with
We're
this
gonna be
because you're gonna
talking
be
about
editing,
the
and I'm making
highest
your life hard.
Grossing film of 2020, which is Demon Slayer, Attack of the Train of Demons. That is not the actual name. I don't remember the actual name,
I
but
think
there
it's
was
like
a train
Murnay?
and there was
Murnai?
a demon.
There's a demon.
There was a demon on that train.
Yes,
It
there
very
was a
good.
demon.
I quite enjoyed that. Actually, you watched it on now, didn't you?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I did, and I made my mom watch it too.
Oh,
Enjoyed it as well. We had to watch it subbed, but and she doesn't like sub, but she was into it, and she had feels when characters died, and I was like, yay!
That's very heartwarming. I feel like it's very nice when an audience member, like I actually was with some people who hadn't actually watched a lot of the series, but they went to watch the film, and they quite enjoyed it. They also were very emotional toward the finale, but overall they really enjoyed it. I think it's like overall, I have some criticisms of it, some very light criticisms. But I very much thought it was a very nice and complete experience. And if Whimsy had wanted to watch it with me, like she should have, she would have also enjoyed it.
Wow, look at this toxic anime fan right here. I am sure I would enjoy Demon Slayer. It's been on my list for a long time. But, as with any anime fan in 2021, there is just so much choice. So no, I have not watched Demon Slayer yet.
I'm sorry. Are you implying that Demon Slayer is a choice?
You're right. It is obligatory. I should just call out from work tomorrow and just glue my eyeballs to the screen and just consume all of Demon Slayer. Otherwise, I'm committing. Otherwise, I am committing a crime against God, man, and and the anime lords. So you're absolutely right. Demon Slayer is not a choice. It is a way of life that I must now ascribe to in order to fit into this club, this very exclusive club. Please don't shame me. Please don't banish me. I will get right on that.
I'm gonna send you to Siberia.
I mean, think about it this way. I believe that the highest grossing movie of 2019 was Avengers Endgame. And the highest grossing film of 2020 is Demon Slayer. So the fact that you haven't seen Demon Slayer is like you saying that you haven't watched Avengers Endgame. So there.
I mean, I see your point. I have watched Avengers Endgame. However, I don't know if this makes it better or worse. There are many other like required, mandatory, like culturally significant movies that I have not watched. I could go off a whole laundry list. So I'm just sort of like known for just not having seen things. Like I haven't watched Pulp Fiction, haven't watched The Matrix, haven't watched a single James Bond movie. There's a long list of things I haven't watched. So Demon Slayer, it's not that weird.
I mean, I guess I will say that I did miss out on the highest grossing superhero film of 2020 myself as well. So, I didn't see Sonic. So
you didn't see Sonic?
Yeah.
Oh man, we gotta shun you.
Can we talk about how underrated the Sonic movie is?
It's really good, actually. I was surprised.
I very much enjoyed the Sonic movie. I very much I thought I would go and only love the parts that Jim Carrey was gonna be in, because he's just an amazing person to have in any comedy movie. But I very much enjoyed like the entirety of that whole film. By the way, we're gonna probably talk about spoilers. We're gonna continue talking about the Sonic movie, so warning. Oh no. Wah, spoilers.
Everybody
dies. This
dies.
is an anime podcast. Why are we spoiling Sonic?
It's an anime.
Wait, this is an anime podcast?
This is a podcast? You call this a podcast?
I don't know what to call this.
Call yourself a podcaster?
These first 14 minutes, we have not talked about underrated anime at all. We've talked about the highest grossing.
We talked about Sonic!
Okay. We've talked about the highest grossing anime, and we've talked about Sonic the Hedgehog. We're being terrible at sticking to our topic.
Okay, back to spoilers about Sonic the Hedgehog.
I'd
have to say the only part of that movie that I thought I very much didn't enjoy like whatsoever was probably the bar fight scene, but even that ended in such a weird and like strange way that I think I enjoyed it at the end.
I remember the bar fight scene.
You remember that? Remember when Sonic wanted to get lit on apple juice or something?
Vaguely.
That was like not alcohol.
All I remember is that that was the last movie we saw together in theaters.
Yeah,
because
the world ended.
Then the world ended. We saw it on Valentine's Day. Aww.
Gross.
And I remember it was really freaking good. Also, I agree. Seeing Jim Carrey like come back, because we hadn't seen him anything in a while, was quite a treat. He was great in that movie.
I can't wait for Sonic 2. It's gonna be so good.
Jim Carrey is my favorite anime character. Confirmed.
He is also my favorite anime character. He was my favorite anime character when he appeared in The Grinch.
I guess you could say he's underrated.
No, he's not underrated.
No, he's not.
An anime? Come on, work with me. Never mind. I was
What?
trying to bring it back.
No.
What?
No, that was the worst way to bring it back.
It was the worst segue known to man.
Can I say
I am
hating
so
Whimsy
confused
is
by your
underrated?
statements.
I would say that calling out Eddie's toxicity is underrated.
Is it?
Yeah.
You guys do it like every episode.
You're right, but we need to broaden it to the wider audience.
I think it's a bit overrated.
I think we could use some of these clips. I think we should start over.
No.
This is so off the
Again?
rails. Yes.
Start over again?
Yes. This is so off the rails. I don't even know how you're gonna use this, Eddie.
It's fine. Just leave it in.
Okay.
We're doing it live.
We could talk about overrated. Like,
No, let's not.
That could get way more like testy.
I feel like it gets a bit more testy. Let's just focus on shows that we enjoyed, that we liked. But I feel like there's a certain type or there's a certain flavor to it that causes certain shows to become forgettable over time. Like even ones that are really good. This happens since we're still on films a little bit. I'll just bring up the fact that there's another movie that came out in 2019, right? 2019 or 2020?
I think it was 2019ish.
I think it was
for sure.
2019, which was Jojo Rabbit, and I think Jojo Rabbit is heavily underrated. It is one of the best movies I've ever seen. It is in my top 10 best movies of all time list.
I thought you were gonna say an anime, so I thought you were talking about a different movie.
No, we're not talking about anime movies. I could talk about anime movies.
Okay.
I want to talk about the fact that Jojo Rabbit's a good movie.
It's a great
amazing.
movie.
It's underrated. It's
Is
very
this the live
good.
action episode again?
Yes. Jojo Rabbit is an anime. Do you remember that part where he drop kicked Hitler out of a window?
I do remember
That's
the
an
part
anime
where
moment.
That is actually a pretty anime moment, yes. That is a great movie. That is honestly a phenomenal film. Everything about it. It's kind of a shame that it got sort of misconstrued, I think, by the I don't know if we can even really get into
No, we
this.
can't even talk about that.
Yeah, sad. I think we might not be able to keep this part in.
Get off, get
No, we
away, just run away.
Yeah.
Run away.
No, we can say,
Yeah.
hey you viewer, you right there, looking at that. I see you looking at that click button.
Attack on Titan?
Whatever you talk about, look at that anime episode. Go watch Jojo Rabbit. You go watch it now. It's good. I liked it.
Watch it alongside
Liked it a
Attack
lot.
on Titan.
Don't do that.
I don't think we can keep that part in, honey. Sorry.
We can't. We just have to cut you out.
Sure. Okay. So we're here to talk about anime, right?
Maybe, perhaps.
I really think we have to start over.
No, we don't have to start
Yes!
over. We don't have to start over again.
This is
I
a
will
mess.
say- wait, didn't we say that Eddie was going to be the one editing this? So
Yes.
if he says it's fine,
Okay.
it's fine because he has to put up with this.
Do
I
it
He's the one that doesn't have
live.
to deal with it.
We're
You're
doing it
right.
live.
You're right. My God.
Okay, now transitioning back to underrated shows, things I was talking about is there, sometimes there's things like controversy or public opinion in a specific context around a show that causes it to kind of have that thing where it's like it gets such a bad rap either before it comes out or after it comes out, that causes people to disregard it, or overlook it. I feel like there's a lot of shows that that kind of fall into that type casting, and I'm not going into the point of like, oh, these shows got canceled. I'm more talking about that there are specific types of anime that I think require a lot more attention than they got, and it's kind of sad to see that like not a lot of people have heard of them or seen them. We actually had watched a series right on the time we started this podcast that was heavily underrated, Yakitate Japan, and we have talked about how much we love Fresh Baked Japan. Multiple
Yakitate
episodes.
Japan is the best drug you will ever do. It is a masterpiece of hilarity and joy. It is something that you should go and watch right now. I don't care if you're studying for your master's thesis. I don't care if you're currently like trying to find the cure for something. I don't care what you're doing. Nothing is more important. Go watch Yakitate Japan. You will thank me later. It's so freaking good.
Or Fresh Baked Japan.
Yes.
It's an amazing show.
Actually.
It's actually one of the best cooking anime I've ever seen. And you can probably go back to another episode where we actually talked about it a bit more, but basically the premise is there's this kid in Japan who goes to a bakery and he's like, man, I love bread so much, I'm going to become the best bread maker ever. And then he goes back and he lives with his family out in the rural areas of Japan. And this kid is dumb as a bag of bricks, but he's also a genius because he's an anime MC. So he figures out how to make different types of bread by himself.
He also has magical hands, so that helps.
Yeah, that also helps. This guy figured out how to make a croissant that is so like layered that it becomes a treasure item. Like it becomes actual gold. I can't describe to you how much we've loved this series, how amazing it is, how hilarious it is. It is very good.
It is probably the series that will eventually, when I find the time to like explore more avenues, um, will probably eventually segue me into the slice of life genre. It was kind of like a gateway anime, if you, in that way. Not necessarily a gateway to anime itself, but a gateway to like broadening my anime horizons because it's not something that I ever would have expected to like. It's only because of this wonderful podcast that I gave it a try, and yes, it is so good. I'm good. Me.
There we go. Thank you. I'm gonna put that in. um, yeah, I feel like it's interesting. I remember. I think Yakitate Japan was actually a series that came out around 2000. It was a very early on series in that regard. It came out around the same time. Like as Yu-Gi-Oh, as a couple of older series, probably like around the same time I would say as Trigun and other things like that. But I've never heard of this show before, and I have to say honestly, it's quite surprising, because I feel like a lot of people who I know who watched anime around that same time would have really enjoyed it. And it's interesting too because it's like looking at it, I can't distinctly identify little things here and there that would cause it to kind of miss its like time in the spotlight. But with other series, I can kind of see that. Um,
I feel like
and I'm curious, now, is there any series that you really enjoy or that you've really liked, whether it was recently or some time ago, that you felt were also underrated in a similar way?
Yeah, so I think like there's a couple of series that, come to mind, and part of I think something that was very nice for me this past year was because of the pandemic, I was able to watch a lot of shows. So some of the newer shows that were coming out, but also some of the older shows. So uh, I have this tendency with my want to watch list that I will put things there and I will basically end up getting to the shows even if they sit there for like ever. Um, which, I think is good because by the time sometimes I'll pick something up, I don't remember why I was so curious about it. But it does make it for an interesting viewing experience. So I would say that one show that is pretty recent and it did come out last year that I do feel like is underrated is Smile Down the Runway, um, which came out, I believe it was winter season in 2020, and it's just like it's such a fun show with what they're doing with fashion, and I think it's a really good example of a series where you're seeing people trying to strive for their goals and pushing back against the rules and regulations that exist within the specific industry. Um, a lot of these things you've seen before in a lot of other shows, trying to be successful in your chosen field. But I just feel like it was it was like so fun to see it and well done. Um, because like, you can have a lot of series that try to do those kind of things, but that doesn't mean they're gonna do them well. Um, uh, another I think there's two other series I want to mention right now. Um, High Score Girl. I don't feel like I've heard a lot of people talking about High Score Girl, but if nothing else, I feel like it's a very ambitious show. Eddie, and John, have either of you watched High School Girl? Actually, have
that
either of you guys watched Smile Down the Runway either? Come to think of
we
it.
we haven't watched Smile Down the Runway, but Eddie did show me a bit of High Score Girl, and actually, it seemed really good. I think it was the only reason we didn't finish it is because it was one of those shows that when we started watching it, it just wasn't the opportune time. So I think we were both very busy with other stuff, so we just kind of like dropped it and forgot about it. But again, not because we didn't like it. We definitely both thought it was like really really good.
Yeah, I really
Yeah.
enjoyed High School Girl. I'd actually watched a little bit of it. I think it got to like around episode 3 or 4. Because it's a very kind of strange show. I definitely agree that it's very unique in a lot of ways in comparison to like a lot of other anime, for various reasons. I was actually really surprised that when Whimsy saw me watching the show, she actually expressed a lot of interest. And that was surprising because, as Whimsy's mentioned before, she's not really into slice of life type shows. And I'd
Or
have to say,
romance either,
or
yeah.
romance either, yeah. And there are a lot of really interesting parts of the show that usually, they touch on really interesting things about, history of arcade gaming in Japan, the progression of, video game consoles, and how they made their way into Japanese households, and how that whole, experience looked like for a kid growing up around that time felt. Especially considering fighting games, because fighting games themselves are a very specific genre that was very popular at that time, and they went into a lot of different things about what a kid growing up in Japan who loved fighting games looked like.
Mhm.
And me and Whimsy actually really enjoyed a lot of the stuff, the history, the romance subplots, the growing up subplots in the, I think it was the 90s,
Yeah.
early
Yep.
90s.
I think um I think that's all honestly, I think that's honestly what I'm starting to sort of fall in love with about anime in general, and why over time I've sort of been able to get invested in genres I've never really been able to get invested in before, is because anime tends to do this thing, and this also relates to the concept of underrated a bit. Anime tends to do this thing where it'll a series will be a series, and maybe it'll fit into a genre, romance, action, whatever, but at the same time it'll also be a very devoted passion project or passionate
Mhm.
expression about a very specific thing or a very specific topic, like bread or modeling, for Smiled on the Runway, or like Eddie was saying, classic arcade games. And I think that is just sort of what one of the beautiful things about anime. But I also think that it relates to, it kind of breaks this concept of underrated, where there are some series I would almost say that it's not underrated. I would say that it just fits into sort of the concept of otaku, this type of otaku will love this show, whereas this type of otaku will love this show, and it sort of fits into that sort of nicheification of anime, if that makes sense. So you could
Yeah.
still argue that a show is underrated, but at the same time sometimes I think there are shows that they're not so much underrated because those who are passionate about this topic will love and adore the show, but you could still argue that it is underrated because anime oftentimes is very good at getting people to watch things, shows about things that they wouldn't normally be interested in. So it's kind of a shame when it doesn't make it to that broader audience. I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like I just kind of contradict myself, but hopefully what I
No,
was saying made sense.
yeah,
No,
I definitely agree.
yeah, and I think that what you're saying is very much the case for Smile Down the Runway, because I think that what especially what people thought the show would be like, which is a very much geared to a female audience that is interested in fashion, most likely deterred a lot of male viewers, even though I think it can be enjoyed by anyone. It very much felt like it was for a specific audience. And I think High Score Girl uh most likely kind of gave the same feeling off, but I think a negative to or something else that I think worked against that show specifically was the choices for the animation, the CGI. It's not god awful, but or anything like that. The video games look great, but I do think there is a tendency uh for anime fans to avoid CGI animes, and there's exceptions, but I find that a lot of people are kind of purists when it comes to having the 2D aesthetic. So a show like uh, High Score Girl is going to have people that are just not going to pick it up because they don't think it looks good.
That's an interesting point. I do feel like that's slightly starting to change, but it also occurred to me that I feel like a lot of times those shows that are very weird or very sort of break the mold in some way, whether or not they get swept under the rug has a lot to do with who generates hype around them. I feel like a
Hmm.
lot of people nowadays decide what to watch in part from Mal and Kitsu and those sort of apps, but a lot of times people, just because there's not people that Nowadays people decide what to watch from a lot of different sources. Sometimes it's Kitsu, sometimes it's Mal. But like there's an increasing popularity of like anime like YouTubers and sort of public anime figures, like sort of figures in anime pop culture. And so I also sometimes think that like when something is kind of weird or out of the box, whether or not it gets popular or kind of like falls on the wayside, it also can kind of be dependent on like who draws attention to it or like who really likes it, and then if they talk about it and who generates hype around the show. So I'm just kind of wondering if maybe High Score Girl, I'm sure it was mentioned in some like seasonal anime videos, but I'm wondering if there just wasn't anyone sort of like in the community who was super passionate and outspoken about it, so it kind of like fell from the wayside, especially because it is a CGI anime. Or I don't know, I wasn't really like part of the anime community around that time, I don't think, but it makes me wonder. I'd be curious to like go
It's not
back and look.
it's not that old of a show. It's 2018. So pretty recent.
Hmm.
In the past few years. But yeah, I don't recall any YouTubers talking about it or any of the ones that I am familiar with. Smile Down the Runway, I did hear Mother's Basement talking about it, though I can't think of anyone else that discussed it. Uh, but yeah, High Score Girl, the only reason why I picked it up was because it was on Netflix, and I kind of have a plan to watch any of the animes that have good ratings on the Netflix or on Netflix, and it's pretty well received on there. So, and also, or actually, that's incorrect. What I do is I check on Netflix for the anime, check if there's a dub, and then I'll check on my anime list to see the ratings, and if it's good, then I'll add it to the queue. That's the system that I use, and it had a good rating. But like that is another example of using Mal, but also in my case, it was also the accessibility, the fact that it was on Netflix that also made me willing to pick it up. But it is still very much on a whim. Uh, Eddie, why did you pick up High Score Girl?
To be honest, I don't remember what motivated me to watch the first episode. Because again, I didn't actually see a lot of people covering the series at the time. Because I believe I watched it in late 2019, I believe, is when we started watching it. But overall, I would have to say that it's one of those shows where I was really put off by the animation style, probably because of that
Hmm.
mixture. But I very much enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I'm like a huge fighting game fan, but I did grow up with a lot of people in my family who really loved playing fighting games, and in my mate friend group, that's the same as well. So like being able to see a lot of this history, being able to see a lot of how this culture around these games started out was what drew me in. And I'm actually surprised that a lot of people, in the fighting game sphere who watch anime don't talk about this show more because it's actually really interesting.
I'm actually curious now to go back and look at the animation because I don't really remember the animation well enough to like comment on it very specifically, but the general impression was that I just felt it was very charming and like very fitting to the series itself. So I'm like really curious to go back and look now.
Another thing I'm going to change this topic a little bit, but this relates to the animation question. Do you feel like people are less willing to go to certain early 2000s animes because of the animation style from that time period being, generally considered ugly? I'm specifically thinking of a series that I watched called Spiral, which I really enjoyed, but I hear no one talking about it. I think I used to hear at least a little bit of chatter about it, but I watched it last year, and it took a while for me to kind of deal with the fact that I think the show came out in like 2001, and the animation was very ugly to look at. So I almost feel like there are people that would just take one look at the first episode and be like, nope, nope, peace out. So I guess I'm just curious. Do you think like that could also be a deterrent, like on top of like the CGI, like just like especially the early 2000s animation style kind of thing?
Well, I feel like are we talking about Smile Down the Runway? Not Smile Down the Runway. I'm sorry. Well, here's the thing that makes me think that while animation style can definitely impact how a series is received, an animation style during a specific time period, I don't really know if it would have hindered whether or not that anime became underrated or not at that time, though, right? If that animation style was standard, or was it like bad even for the time period? That's what I'm wondering.
I shared a clip I think with Eddie at some point, and Eddie felt like it looked older than it was
Oh, okay.
when I sent it. But yeah, I mean I don't recall like a huge hullabaloo when it originally came out, but I do recall that it did get some traction in terms of Funimation, or at least Funimation promoted it a fair amount. Like it was on the Funimation channel, though I did not have Funimation channel, so I didn't see it there. I think I recall the DVDs for it being pretty common. But yeah, I guess though I think that one thing that you're getting at, Mchan, is the idea of like something can be underrated when it comes out, uh, and that's different than something becoming underrated as time goes on.
That's for sure. Yeah. Um, if it was old for its time, like old looking, I mean, then I definitely think that could influence it because I feel like even now we do sometimes see, like we were talking about how animation style or art style could really impact how a series is received. Like, I'm gonna use a show that is definitely not underrated, or at least it wasn't when it came out. You could say that it's gotten less attention in recent times, but Mob Psycho 100 got a lot of positive attention. It also has a great art animation style and a great art style, but because its art style is so different, I think that because there's some people who just immediately have a bias of like this is different, I don't like it. And there was some negative pushback against the unique art style, even though it's like awesome. I feel like that one might have been ignored by a lot of people who just kind of weren't used to it if it wasn't for like the extremely passionate manga readers. So I feel like manga is also like a big part of this conversation too, because I feel like Mob Psycho 100, like the art style, would have definitely impacted its rating, um, if it wasn't for like passionate manga readers. So especially if the series you're talking about didn't have like a very passionate base to start with, I could definitely see like the art style sort of hindering it, if that makes sense.
I will also say or I'll say, at least for Mob Psycho 100, it had another thing that worked to its advantage in terms of people going to at least try it. The fact that the creator was the same creator as One Punch Man.
Hmm.
So, I think there were some people that looked at the art style potentially and said, it doesn't look that great, but I really enjoyed One Punch Man, so I'm going to pick it up. I've definitely had series where I've picked them up because I've liked the work of the author in the past. And that doesn't necessarily mean in manga form, that can also be in anime form. Though I do generally pick up a lot of stuff. But I will say, for example, Fire Force intrigued me partially because I knew that it was from the creator of Soul Eater. And I was hearing some good things already about the series, but I think that it did help me a lot knowing that the creator was the same creator as Soul Eater, and I wanted to see more of his work. But like, oh, and another one, oh God, this is going to be a flashback uh that I don't even know if Eddie's going to even get this reference, but Buso Renkin, I believe that's how it's pronounced. God help me. Was a series that was done by the same creators Rurouni Kenshin, and that series I definitely only picked up at the time because I knew it was from the creator of Rurouni Kenshin, and I was very curious about it. Uh, that was a long time ago. We're talking like 10 years ago, and I frankly would not necessarily call that series underrated from what I remember. It was shonen trash. It wasn't, from what I recall, it wasn't good, it wasn't bad. It was just shonen trash, but it definitely influenced me to pick it up. It was shonen trash that I might have not otherwise have bothered with because there's a lot of other shonen trash shows that I just have never picked up. But that swayed me, I think, in that case.
I'm actually curious, now, are there, speaking of like quote quote trash, are there any series that you think are underrated specifically because they have been labeled as like trash, whether it be isekai trash, shonen trash, etc., but that you actually think are kind of good as like their own show, or like they stand on their own, and despite the sort of label, you actually think they're a good series?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm going to ponder it a bit, but I will say that one series that all three of us enjoyed that has been labeled as fairly trashy, not that good, was the Pet Shop in Another World anime, which is that's not actually their name, but uh, what's the name of the actual show? Shoot,
Kimono Mask, right?
Kimono
Kimono
Michi.
Michi,
Oh,
I think.
Michi. Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
Kimono Michi.
Yeah, yeah. So that show isn't that show wasn't well received from what I recall when we were looking at Mal, and I thought it was fine. And I have the feeling that a lot of people were deterred from watching it because it had a pretty low rating, and I don't recall any YouTubers or anything like that specifically talking about it. But I do think, the Mal most likely heard it a fair amount, would be my guess.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
actually really curious if like perhaps the reception to Kimono Michi is just has to do with the fact that it was a good series, right? I actually really enjoyed it. It was very funny. But there are a lot of good series, really funny isekai, just because of the oversaturation of isekai. So if a show's not either like super super good, like say ReZero, and or if it doesn't have, it's even if it is trash, if it doesn't have some sort of like peak trash, something about it just like appeals to the isekai trash psyche, and like the core of what people like about it. If it doesn't have one of those things, I wonder if maybe people just kind of like are very apathetic towards it, perhaps. Eddie's nodding, but I think
I would agree with
okay.
that. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure. Interesting theory.
What do you think, Eddie? Why do you think Kimono Michi is underrated?
I feel like there's lots of things about Kimono Michi that kind of break it away from normal isekai anime, and I feel like in a lot of shows where you try to do something different, it works out. But I feel like the thing that comes to mind when I think about Kimono Michi is they played it very safe, you know, for the type of anime it was. I feel like they did do a lot of really interesting things that spread it, from the normal isekai. Things like him being a bodybuilder, him not being all that like perplexed or interested in the cute beast women walking around. I mean, like even his relationship with that one kobold wife. I feel like they play that up a lot, and it's a point of like his just fascination with the fact that a lot of people in the isekai world have animal features, but can speak and talk and interact with people. Like overall, it felt like it got into a lot of things that were really interesting, but it never really broke ground with them a lot.
Mhm.
And I feel like that kind of was a detriment for the series, because like there was a lot of times where he got into direct conflicts with the guild in the main town that he stayed in, because they wanted him to defeat demon beasts, of which he was directly opposed to doing. And I felt like there was a constant gag that they played on, which was that every time they would see him, they would go, "Oh, it is the demon beast slayer," and then he would throw that person through a wall because it upset him that they would even, attach him to the idea of killing an animal, whether demon beast or not. But he never actually had any distinctive conflict with the people of the guild because of that. Because it seems like, for the most part, in the world setting that they described, everyone else just kind of had to hunt them. But he was directly opposed to it because he wanted to run a pet shop, which ended up being a pet shop of demonic beasts. But it seems like he was able to, manage some existence in that world despite that. Although I don't exactly even thinking about it, I was very confused with the fact that no one in the town had an issue with this dude just amassing a horde of demonic creatures in his house over time.
Yeah, the gags in that show were so well done, and were very laugh out loud hilarious. But I get what you mean about like, as far as the actual underlying concepts, they didn't really take a lot of them very far or like explore things. So I feel like in the end you get a good comedy, right? It's about like cotton candy. It's very tasty, but also very like it's like a cloud and then it's gone. Not very like
There's not
not a lot of
substance to it.
substance. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was looking for. So I feel like that had a lot to do. But I still feel like something can just stand on its own as like a good comedy. So I don't know if I'd say it's underrated, but it's drowned out for sure.
Yeah, it gets drowned out. And I feel like if they had played on that a bit more, it would have turned out a lot better. Like, there was a lot of the characters that I really did enjoy. Like, I really like the vampire maid, right? I feel like all too often in the isekai like comedy genre, we get that character that's like supposed to be super powerful, but they're just extremely lazy. You know?
Yeah, I
feel like
her.
that's always a good gag. I feel like that's always a great comedy thing to have in a show like that. And I feel like a lot of the characters feel very nice and distinct. But again, like, we didn't have a lot of substance to that. Like, the only character we actually saw get a lot of heavy development. Actually, I think there's two. Is it 2 or 3? I'm gonna say 2.5. Because now we're gonna talk about spoilers for that series, just in case you guys didn't already.
We might want to also do a summary of what the series is about. I'm just realizing that we haven't really done that for any of these shows, and we're saying that they're underrated, so there's a good chance that people have not actually seen them or heard of them.
Yeah, you're right. Well, we can start with Kimono Michi in correcting this. So Kimono Michi is a story in which a masked wrestler named Animal Mask gets into the pro wrestling ring every time with his dog sidekick, which I believe is God, what was it?
We'll put it on the screen.
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen. If what's that?
It's like Hachiko or something.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
And it's so adorable because like every time he does like a flying slam, where he goes and jumps off the side of the ring to like body slam his opponent, his little like I want to say it's like a Pomeranian because I think it's supposed to be like a little Pomeranian also jumps off the ring with him. I love it. And during his last match before he retires, he's fighting his like number one rival, Mao, the Demon King, who is another wrestler who has been like obsessed with him like his entire career because he's lost every time they've ever fought. And it's a really tense match. And then right at the end, when Mao's about to lose, Animal Mask gets up on the side of the ring and he goes for his characteristic body slam with his dog flying behind him, and suddenly he disappears from the ring. And everyone's like, "Whoa, that was really cool. He just like left or something because he retired, I guess." But actually, he ended up getting summoned to another world by a princess. And obviously, still being really confused about just appearing in a different world. He thought everyone was doing like a gag or something, like as part of like a TV thing for the Pro Wrestling Federation. By the way, if you're not familiar with pro wrestling, they do have really strange things going on in general in the background. It usually motivates a lot of the fights. Sometimes they even have like a long-running story of a rivalry or friendship between characters, or getting into conflict with a character that used to be a friend because of various things. So he thought that everyone was still in character when they summoned him to another world. And he thought he had to get into a fight with the princess after she asked him to go out and fight a bunch of animals.
He loves animals, by the way.
And by the way, if you couldn't tell by the fact that his signature move is doing a flying slam with his tiny Pomeranian, this man loves animals. And he was about to retire and start a pet shop. So he thought they were doing a gag. So this princess comes up and she's like, "Oh, great hero, please go out and slay all the demon beasts of the land." And he goes, "Excuse me? You want me, Animal Mask, to defeat and harm animals? I don't think so." And he grabs her and he suplexes her into the ground immediately, to the horror of the entire castle. And they begin chasing him out like a criminal. And he just eventually realizes that he's not in the human world anymore, or on Earth. So he's like, "Well, I guess I can start my dream of running a pet shop now. Because I don't exactly have the skill set to return home.
Except instead of regular pets, they're giant demon beasts.
Like Cerberus.
You might want to
and a
repeat that
griffin.
second to last sentence, Eddie, because I accidentally hit my mic, so it's most likely going to get picked up.
Oh, it didn't come out on this side, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Never mind.
Yeah, but that's the story of Animal and I'm going to talk now about spoilers of this series. Because I feel like overall, I felt like they gave characters really nice impressions, but not a lot of them had any depth. And I feel like that was mostly in part because the only sort of reasons that they touched on characters in the series was for jokes, not for development. And the only times in which they actually did break that rule was for like 2.5, I would say. Like, I really enjoyed the arc in which they talked about that one girl who showed up was an adventurer, and she was half lizard man, right? And she had a lot of complexes about being half lizard because she had scales on her belly, which, like, obviously in the Animal Mask joke sense, he was in love with her. He loved everything about her scales. He thought they were so cool, and she was really surprised about that. And he ended up training her because before she showed up, she was like a really useless adventurer, and she actually became like his second in command, and eventually had like this whole fight sequence. I thought it was nice at the end of that. That was kind of like the mid-season big thing, I would say. And the only other one being the one in which he had a long conversation, and they do this whole thing building it up where it's like the vampire maid, who's really lazy. Her main issue is that, like, overall they describe that the person she serves is like this like big like noble in an evil noble society working under the demon lord, and a lot of people make fun of the person that she follows around because she's so useless. So she just suddenly decides that toward the end of the series, after being taunted by one of her old rivals, that she wants to train and become a professional wrestler. And she asks Animal Mask for help. And I thought that sequence at the end was really nice, although it was like, I think, a bit too late at that point. Because by then, they build up this whole thing into a fight between like her and her rival, and and of course they do a joke during that. Like, the whole scene turns into chaos. But I felt like it was really nice that right at the end, when they finally like nail the fight scene between her and this person she's been in conflict with the entire season, she beats her, she pins her down, and they do a count, and she celebrates like she won, never realizing that she actually had to pin her down for the full count. So her opponent obviously gets up and throws her out of the ring, and she loses. But at the end of it, like, all the characters were really proud of her. I felt like it was a generally nice sequence, but I feel like if they had focused on it a bit more, if they had done a little more with it, they could have benefited from it a lot.
Yeah.
'Cause that was honestly the only like form of actual character development I think I saw in the series.
I think they just needed to balance it out more, I think, and put things more in the beginning so they had the room to kind of let them grow rather than be kind of shoehorned in at the end.
Yeah, and I feel like they had room for it. There was a lot of episodes we saw that were just like, there's a demonic creature, go and fight it, Animal Mask, and then he ends up befriending it or almost getting eaten by it because it's like a giant, like, 11-foot tall demonic creature.
Just rub its belly. That's all you gotta do, right?
I would not recommend that with large predators. Just like in general.
Yes, don't.
Anyone
please
in this,
don't go out there and rub bellies.
if
of
you see like
wild
a large,
animals.
scaly creature that was most likely an alligator, I would not recommend trying to belly pet that.
Yes, don't do that.
Don't do that.
We're talking about anime here.
Anime teaches you things, though.
Not this.
Like-
Not this.
Let's be responsible
do not
with
learn-
animals. Because guess what? If that animal eats you, that's your fault. All right? And now you're the reason that, like, that poor animal is not going to be able to, like, stay in its environment. All right? It's your fault. Be wise around wild animals. Come on now, people.
Only you can protect wildlife
and yourself.
and yourself. That was no. No.
Oh my god. We were doing so good. What did we do? All right, back on the rails. Get on the rails.
We were never on the rails. So hey, Whimsy, do you, in your mind, can you think of any other shows like that? Any anime that are specifically you felt like were underrated for, kind of the reasons we've talked about so far? Or any that new ones that you can think of?
Yeah, actually. I feel like Appare-ranman is an extremely underrated show. And I feel like I can kind of connect it to some of the reasonings that we were talking about other shows so far. So let me preface this. Sorry. So let me start off by saying that Appare-ranman is freaking fantastic. I loved everything about it, from the sort of desert steampunk aesthetic to really, really good characters to really good writing. Really good plot writing, both for the overall plot and the individual episode plots. But I will also say that even though the writing was really good, it wasn't a super deep show. So I feel like maybe because it wasn't like that deep, that kind of held it back from like hitting that sort of status of like, yeah, everyone's really hyped about Appare-ranman. But I still think that even though it didn't get that status and even though it's not quote unquote deep, you should be hyped about Appare-ranman. If you haven't watched it, go watch it, because honestly, I got so hyped watching that show. Appare-ranman is about two Japanese guys who end up stranded in the United States. One of these individuals is sort of your more like typical like one of these individuals is your more sort of sociable. He fits in. He tends to like think about the world in a much more sort of, I guess you could say, like socially typical. Hold on.
Just say he's a normal guy.
Yeah, okay.
Just say he's a normal.
Okay,
dude.
hold on. I'm sorry, it's over. So yeah, Appare-ranman. So what it's actually about, Appare-ranman is about two Japanese guys who end up stranded in the United States. One of these two guys is sort of your normal, everyday cool guy, right? And the other one is Appare, and he is extremely, extremely like enthusiastic about technology and like creating different technological devices and inventions. And he's not necessarily the most sociable person, but he over time you sort of see how he does connect with others a lot during the series. And anyway, these two guys, they get stranded in the United States, and they end up trying to raise the money to go back to Japan by participating in a Trans-America Continental Race. And that's where you get sort of like the wacky car racing stuff and the sort of steampunk aesthetic of the different mechanics of the automobiles. And it just turns into this amazing romp of like wacky racing across the country. A lot of really unique and interesting sort of alternate history America depictions, and like of like the Wild West, like I said, technology and like sort of the Industrial Revolution. I don't know, there's just so much about it, both aesthetically, conceptually, and story-wise, that I really, really enjoyed. I've done a terrible job explaining this series, but it's okay, because you know what? You should watch it. And I definitely
we also have a video that we'll release eventually.
Eventually,
yes.
Where we do a better job, I think, talking about why you should watch Appare-ranman. Where my brain isn't melting. But anyway, I definitely think Appare-ranman is extremely underrated. I don't think something needs to be deep to be good, and I think the anime community would generally agree with that. But because there's just so much anime that comes out, it's very easy if something is not super, super deep for it to get kind of like swept to the side and drowned out. And I definitely think that Appare-ranman got drowned out. It was a very busy season, I believe, when it came out. But I think that it definitely deserves more people's attention because it is a beautiful artistic endeavor. It is a very beautiful character study of a lot of different characters, and just in general. Also, it depicts PTSD better than like anything I've seen in a while. Just in general, it's such a good series. And yes, I definitely think it's probably the underrated anime that comes to mind. That and another one. But I think the other one is sort of still up in the air whether or not it'll be considered underrated. So Appare-ranman, it's been solidified as such. And yeah, I definitely think it's like my go-to example when I think about it.
Eddie, when you think of an underrated... Oh, wait, actually, no. Let's go back. Sorry, Eddie. I'm going to make your editing job harder because I feel like we should respond more. to what you just
Hello
said
and
about
welcome to the
Appare-ranman.
A.N.I.M.E podcast.
Don't do the intro again. I'm leaving
Okay,
that in.
sorry, go ahead
I'm
on
leaving
now.
that in.
Okay, yeah, I think that Appare-ranman had, and I do think that we discussed this on the video that we did do about Appare-ranman. It had a fair amount of things working against it, because it was delayed because of the pandemic. It had a couple of episodes released. And I think when the first few episodes were released, they had a fair amount of discussion. I think also Millionaire Detective was a similar thing where there was a fair amount of people discussing it when it initially came out. But then when basically a lot of anime studios had to go on hold, it took several months or so for the rest of the show to be able to finish. And when it came back to be finished, and this is also, again, true for Millionaire Detective, it just didn't feel like people were talking about it anymore. It was just basically a footnote, like, oh yeah, this anime is back. But it felt like the community had moved on at that point, where it wasn't really concerned about talking about these shows anymore. Maybe because it almost had a sense of it was old news now, even though it was having things being released. I honestly think that for I've noticed for a lot of shows, often when they air in their initial season, there's a lot of discussion. So whenever they start their first 12 or 13 episodes, we'll have a fair amount of discussion. But then when you get to maybe if it's a 26 episode, when you get to second half, for when that part of the show airs, often there's a lot less discussion as well, which I find very interesting. So I almost felt like maybe maybe something similar happened here where it's you have the attention span often to pay attention to the show for one season, but when it goes into multiple seasons, people don't really think about it as actively or pursue information about it as actively.
I guess that's just sort of a natural consequence of just how much anime is coming out. I mean, it is a shame that the specific release, like unique situation around its release, sort of derailed it. But I think, like in the long run, I'm not sure if Appare-ranman would have maintained like a high status anyway, just because there's so much competition and so many things like demanding its time. But I think that's interesting because I feel like if Appare-ranman had come out at an earlier time, it would have been a classic. But you could say that about hundreds of shows.
Yeah. No, but I feel like that's definitely a thing too, because it's like I feel like Appare-ranman does sort of encapsulate like that much older anime feel, and it's not to a detriment. Like there was parts about it that I really did enjoy that were like that, but I do agree with you that if it had come out at a much earlier time, when it wasn't just I guess like inspired by those anime ideas, but instead like showcasing them, as like one of the first frontrunners, it probably would have been much more like um, popular. When it would have been a much more like talked about show.
Yeah, because it
Yeah,
definitely has all the pieces, I think.
Yeah, and I feel
yeah,
like that's the sad thing about some shows. It's just like there are a lot of things about it that are good, but it's not classic. And it's not like to discount it. Like it wasn't a terrible series because it wasn't a classic.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of really good movies that aren't classics.
I'm not even saying it deserves to be a classic because it definitely isn't like the best thing I've ever watched. I'm just saying that like it. I feel like it would have been if it had come out at a previous time, which I think just goes to show how much higher the threshold is now for something to rise above and maintain that level of attention and become a classic. Like there's been discussions about what will become a classic from our generation. I mean, obviously Attack on Titan, but like whether or not even things that are deeply, deeply beloved, like Mob Psycho 100, whether or not that'll even be a classic is like contestable just because of how much stuff is grabbing the anime community's attention constantly every season after every season. So it's so easy to forget about even like the best of the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna blah, 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 blah. Blah.
we're doing great. We're doing great.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
Thank you, Anna. That was
All right.
perfectly timed.
Anna, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I feel like now that you're mentioning it, something about the feel of the show feels very much like maybe like 2008 would have been a really good time for a show like this to have kicked off. I feel like I don't know, something about like that 2008-ish time period was a bit experimental in a rugged environment kind of thing. Actually, maybe like when did Bakano come out? I feel like I've mentioned this before. A lot of what I think about when I think of Appare-ranman kind of connects back to Bakano because I feel like they're covering not exactly the same time period, but they're going for that American old train time vibe. Bakano was 2007, and I'd say Bakano was well received and got a lot of attention at the time. I The audiences would be different between those two series. I will say that still, like Bakano is pretty violent, and it relishes in that. Uh, Appare-ranman is a lot more lighthearted, though not completely lighthearted. But I feel like, yeah, that like 2007, 2008 time period most likely would have been a good time for a series like this to come out. Would have been very interesting to see a series like this coming out, very close together with a show like Bakano. Um, because again, that's the other like kind of American historical 1800s, 1900s kind of period. Like they're the ones that I think of. Um, but yeah, would you agree, Eddie, that Bakano you wouldn't consider that underrated, right? You would consider that pretty well known and received, correct?
Yeah, I would say, series like Bakano, especially around that time period, I feel like there was actually a lot of classics that came out.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's that, I believe, what was it? It's not the original FMA, but I think, was it Brotherhood? No, I think Brotherhood
Brotherhood
released
started,
later.
I think, 2009 or 2008. So
That's
yeah, a
right.
similar time period.
Yeah, for that, because I feel like
Um,
there was a lot of really good series that started around that time, and it's really interesting to think about that, like just a period of like that many years, how
mhm,
how many things it probably inspired, but you don't really think about because a lot of those anime series, sort of fall by the wayside.
yeah. Also, I feel like I should give a summary on Bakano, just in general, so that you guys can understand a bit of the overlap. Eddie, you can like edit this to be in the right order later. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. I feel like if we're just generally talking about it, we like for the most part, you and I know what Bakano is, but I feel like it
Yes.
benefits the audience and Whimsy who hasn't seen it just get like grasp an idea of like what we are talking about. Because like
Yep.
besides the American aesthetic of the 1920s involved in both, I feel like there are a lot of things about Bakano that are really interesting, and I think people would
Mhm.
like it. So feel free.
Yeah. Yeah. Bakano is in itself a very interesting series. It's been quite a while since I did watch it, but yeah. So Bakano's a series that takes place in the 1930s. You were close, Eddie, but 1930s.
Hmm.
Wow, off by
Uh,
10 years? Jeez.
I know. Whimsy, your boyfriend's not weeb enough. You gotta dump him.
Clearly. But
Yes.
that's for a
Okay.
later time. Go ahead.
Filing
Yeah,
divorce
yeah.
papers
After we
now.
finish recording. You...
You just hear me scratching as I'm writing furiously. Alright, sorry, go
But
ahead. On
yes,
now.
Anna, please continue with your description.
All right. Yeah. So this Bakano takes place in the 1930s, though I will put an asterisk for it. It's a series that has a heavy amount of flashbacks into other time periods. So, and I believe that some of it starts 1700s or they're spread out. So there's a lot of uh flashbacks that really go back like long periods of time. Not just like into the 1920s, but a lot farther back. But the main story is taking place on a train. And basically, you have a situation where you have a couple of people that on the train that had some stuff happen to them in the past that we don't you find out about through the flashbacks. But you besides them you have people on the train that are basically planning to I believe it's either to steal from the train or just straight up kill everyone. I actually think I think it was they were going to take a hostage, I believe, and they were just going to kill everyone else because they were there. Um, and so that's kind of the the main backstory. So there's a bunch of like fighting going on in this train and very brutal fighting in certain cases. And you you have a lot of colorful characters on the train. So first of all, you have those people that I mentioned that had things going on 100 years ago plus. Uh, so the fact that they're on the train and doing stuff and not just in a coffin most likely gives you a hint that something's going on. And you also have someone that works on the train that's a mass murderer, and he's running around the whole time, just kind of adding to the chaos as these other people who are trying to, I believe, take this, kidnap this person, is also kind of doing their thing, and they're all very colorful. It revels a lot in the time period that it takes place in, within the 1930s American aesthetic and on the train. And I think that a lot of the discussion of like, oh, you're on the train and all this stuff is happening. There was a bit of that also in Appare-ranman, where they had some stuff with the trains and um, it kind of like what would happen on them in those time periods. And then maybe that's part of the reason why I make that connection. Appare-ranman is definitely takes place earlier in terms of timeline in the United States. They're not happening in uh the same time period. Um yeah, so Appare-ranman is at the end of the 19th century, so we're talking like 40 years removed. But hey, there's also the aspect that I'm an American who clearly does not know history, so that 40-year time difference doesn't mean anything to me. It's just all the same thing, right? Right? That's how history works, right? Uh,
Judging by your tone, I would
yeah.
say no. Question mark? Maybe?
I
You
don't
say this
know.
out no, but you have one of the like you know. Blah, blah, blah. You say this out no, but you know more about history than like most people I know.
I had this. This is a side note. Don't include it in the podcast. I was talking to one of my coworkers, and I don't know. Nowadays, my example of random knowledge is the Byzantine Empire, and I was explaining to this coworker about the Byzantine Empire. He's like, "Wow, you did a better job explaining the Byzantine Empire than anyone in my college courses. I was a theology major, and I didn't really understand what the Byzantine Empire was." And I'm like, "Oh wow, that
they
is
should
really interesting because
they should
yeah,
just
the
pay you
Byzantine.
now. Why don't they pay you?
They should pay me
You
for
should
for
be their
teaching about the
professor now.
Byzantine Empire. I Just clearly I you know what, Turkey should just like hire me as an ambassador because I just keep talking about the Byzantine Empire for them, you know. Just keep flexing that knowledge. Yeah. But anyways, no, yeah, I mean 40 years is a an extensive period of time. Like the characters in Appare-ranman most likely would be still alive during the events of Bakano, but you know, I think that we don't have a lot of anime that covers like that late 1800s, early 1900s period in the United States. So I think that it does create an aesthetic overlap. And I can see that there would be people that would like the aesthetics of something like Bakano that could really enjoy what they would find in Appare-ranman. Even though Appare-ranman is very fluid in terms of taking what it wants to from that specific time period, but also Bakano can do that as well. Because, like I said, there are people that are a couple hundred years old running around on the train. So it's not exactly accurate to the time period, though, I can't confirm or deny that vampires exist. So maybe.
Just in general, I would like
Possibly.
to see more period pieces. Give me the
Yeah,
period pieces.
I love period pieces. Uh if there's a series when uh y'all were talking of or when I was when Whimsy, you asked me about a series that I felt like was underrated, or sorry, that a series that isn't rated well on my anime list or Kitsu that, I think should have a better rating. Another period piece show came to mind actually, and I don't know if I'm very mixed on it because I have it's just very much I have a hard time necessarily recommending it, but there's a lot that I think is very interesting about the show. So part of me feels like at the very least it's an experience that maybe should be pursued, but it might not be super enjoyable. But
Which series is that?
Les Chevaliers de Leon, Aeon, uh, uh, sorry, Whimsy, help me out here. You took French. Les
That
Chevaliers
doesn't
d'Aeon.
mean anything.
Hey,
I'm
French expert.
horrible at French. It was my worst
Hey,
subject
expert
in
of
school.
French.
Um,
Help her with that pronunciation.
I know which series you're talking about, but I will not help because French was my worst subject.
Your worst subject? Are you French Canadian?
Yes, that doesn't. But I don't speak French though.
Uh, d'Aeon. Yeah. Okay. Uh, to anyone that knows French,
We're sorry.
actually, I'm
We're
so
not
sorry. I am sorry. You might not be sorry, but I regret everything. uh, because this is a complicated series to talk about, and I think that just bringing it up, it like, oh my goodness, it's a show that I think most likely was it would if you watch it now, I'm sure that a lot of people would have a lot of issues with how they handle the main character. Let's put it that way. Uh, yeah, I guess I'll do the summary of the series. So basically, the main character who his sister um was killed, and sad, she's dead, and she was awesome and super strong or whatever. So he wants to find out why she was killed and what happened there. And the the both him and his sister are aristocrats in 1700s French courts. So you've got the 1700s French backdrop going on for a lot of the show. And basically what you have is you've got the 1700s aesthetic, so that's like really fun. Oh wait, it looks like they have like basically like vampires, zombies that are running around. I don't think they ever call them vampires, but they behave a lot like vampires. So yeah, so you have 1700s aristocrats in French fighting vampires, and so they play a lot with like the French setting, but also they travel to England and they travel to Russia and they talk to people that were of historical importance of those time periods in those places. And that's really interesting because I just love like that historical backdrop. Go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Even if like you're kind of implying that there's some stuff that's not so good about the series.
Are you saying that vampires aren't historically accurate?
What? Shush. You seem to imply out now that there's some things that are not so good about the series. Hence why it's sort of like mixed. It induces mixed feelings, but just that historical background alone makes it sound interesting, like at least worth watching. Because a lot of shows are like that. Like it may not be great, but there's stuff that at least is interesting enough in concept to warrant like your attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The anime style is also very unique, so I think like that's another reason why it's worth checking out. It just feels like it would try to be very different, and it won't hold up in a lot of regards. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it's
just like Eddie.
interesting. Ooh.
Why don't you let her finish her sentence?
Sorry.
Let me just put it this way. When you start playing around with real historical figures in a show, it can be pretty it can go over fine, but you can get into some like questionable territory depending on how you handle it. I'll leave it at that. I know I'm still being vague, but this would be a very large discussion to go into if we wanted to go down that road.
We will not do that because the episode is over.
Yeah, we're kind of out of time for today, but there's so much more to discuss. Like for example, we could totally do a whole episode about period pieces. And
Please look forward to that. And
We
please look
discussed
forward
doing
to
that.
our Appare-ranman
yeah,
episode.
and Eddie doesn't get a turn because he's in the corner.
Oh
can't-
no.
We've talked about this. We need another microphone. Like that, our whole setup is ruined.
If I put
by
you in
this
the
corner
corner,
idea.
here, go stand in the corner, and then we'll see how loud you can.
Oh my god.
Go to it. Let's figure out how we're gonna end things. We're gonna
All
end
right.
with Eddie in the corner. We're gonna do a quick audio experiment. Like go to the very corner, like very
How far?
corner of the room,
How far corner?
Okay.
very
Like
far
there?
corner. Yes. Okay, go to the very far corner and say, "Help me, I'm sad."
This is basically Siberia. I'm being banished to Siberia.
Okay, what out now?
I
I
was just
can't
gonna
hear
say if we're
anything.
finishing up, I can just kind of like give you a hint on like kind of why this show is kind of controversial.
This idea.
Let's hold on. Wait.
This is a terrible idea.
Okay, so have a great day, everybody.
Thank you for coming. Look forward to our next episode of the A.N.I.M.E podcast.
Shush, you're in the corner. Do you want to say
So-
bye? Do you want to say bye?
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great week. All right, I'm gonna hit end recording.